folks. Welcome once again. Situated here. We are still covering the battle of Ai. I know. It's actually episode 3 of 4, so there's even more after this. This has gone longer than I thought. It's like the Simpsons. 2 decades or something. So today we're going to cover Joshua chapter 8 from verse 1 to 22. See, I'm covering big chunks of Joshua, but it's still endless. I feel like I can just read through chapters and we're still going to talk about the same general episode here. But there's some new stuff that we will discuss and cover. For those of you who have not been here, let me catch you up. Most of us are familiar with this era, with this time in history of the Hebrew people, of the Jews. They were going into the promised land. They have already crossed the Jordan. The first conquest was the city of Jericho, and we know how that happened, a rather miraculous fashion. Then they moved on to the next city, which was Ai. I'm calling it Ai. It's actually pronounced I, but I don't want to just say I over and over again, making it sound like I'm talking about me. It's transliterated, I guess, AI, for our sake. So everyone was expecting a great victory because this was a lesser opponent. Nevertheless, surprisingly, they were defeated, and Joshua and the leaders sought out God to figure out why he was doing this. And he responded by saying, "It's not me, it's you. There's sin amongst you." And it turned out that one of the individuals that were part of this battle, the conquest of Jericho, he took of things that he should not have taken, and he hid them. So God went ahead and shined a light upon that, and said individual was disciplined very severely, harshly apparently, but again, that was a lesson that was learned by the community. God is in charge. As long as you follow his decrees, things will go well. Once you step out of line, not so much. And there we saw God lifting his favor upon his people. And again, this city, which should have been relatively easy to conquer, now became something that was very powerful and something that they could not handle. Now that the sin was dealt with, they get to try it again. So this is chapter 8, essentially the second battle of Ai and the fall of Ai. We will see exactly how that came to be. So I'll read to you verse 1 through verse 8 initially. And this is basically the plan of action for this particular battle. Previously, how it happened was Joshua sent out spies to this region, and they saw that this particular group of people, they weren't very powerful, so they said, just send out 2,000 to 3,000. Should not be a big deal. Joshua sent out 3,000. They fled. 30 plus people actually died from the Hebrew army, and now they have to, make plans again for their second try at conquering this particular region. So it goes on from verse 1 to verse 8 of chapter 8 by saying, "Now that the Lord said to Joshua, 'Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. Take all the people of war with you, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, his people, his city, his land. And you shall do to Ai, its king, as you did to Jericho and its king. Only its spoils and its cattle you shall take as booty. For yourself lay an ambush for the city behind it.' So Joshua rose, all the people of war, to go up against Ai. And Joshua chose 30,000 mighty men of valor and sent them away by night. And he commanded them, saying, 'Behold, you shall lie in ambush against the city, behind the city. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you be ready. Then I and all the people who are with you will approach the city, and it will come about when they come out against us as at first, that we shall flee before them, for they will come out after us till we have drawn them from the city, for they will say they are fleeing before us as at the first. Therefore, we will flee before them. Then you shall rise from the ambush and seize the city, for the Lord your God will deliver it into your hands, and it will be when you have taken the city that you shall set the city on fire. According to the commandment of the Lord, you shall do it. See, I have commanded you. So now, let's pause right here for a second. We have a different strategy. Certain things are very obvious. Initially, Joshua just sent 3,000 men, and now he seemingly is sending 10 times more. Now, it's kind of weird for us to think of this difference in the number of people involved in this battle, because previously they were defeated not so much because they did not have enough military power, but because God's favor was not before them. God was not fighting on their behalf. And now seemingly everything is okay. They are forgiven. They have dealt with the sin, but God is telling them, take more people. So on the surface, it doesn't seem like it makes much sense. We've seen stories before in the Bible where God actually says and does the opposite, because he wants the people to know that it's not because of the amount of power or the amount of military men or weapons that they have. It's because of him. But again, here they're sending more people. Why? Ultimately, we don't know. It's part of the strategy. But also, seemingly, this is also an opportunity for them to take the spoils of war. The more people who are involved in this battle, the more people will actually take hold of these treasures. And this was something that God established from the beginning of this chapter. Remember, the utter tragedy of what happened prior was that Achan could have just waited. If he would have just waited, he could have received certain things that he wanted, the spoils of war. But instead of waiting, he took it upon himself to make that very bad decision, which not only cost his life, but also cost a lot of heartache for a lot of other people. And here again, it seems like God wants to get other people involved, not because he needs them, but because he wants them to take advantage of the rewards of this conquest. So we have more people involved. These first 8 verses, as I mentioned, this is just sort of the plans of the battle. Hereafter, from verse 9 to verse 22, and the story goes on, and we'll see that eventually. But from 9 to 22, it's actually the execution of the battle plan. So we'll see a little bit more detail. As I read this, and I don't know if you have read this portion of Scripture recently, but it gets a little convoluted. It's basically military techniques, right? Plans for battle. So what I thought was I would illustrate this in a more visible manner. And initially I thought I would draw up a little map with little arrows and little fighting men going one way or another, but then I thought that's kind of boring. I thought I'd do something a little bit more interactive. So because I want to do that and be a little bit more creative, I'm going to call out my helpers for you to stand in your particular spots. And I'll explain exactly what is happening here, and you guys can just witness in awe this. Okay, so we have quite a few people here, 5 of them specifically, and I am going to essentially tell you who they are. Bella here, this beautiful young lady, she is Bethel. Who is Bethel? We will see here a little bit more details regarding Bethel, but Bethel basically is an ally of Ai. But Bethel is essentially like a chihuahua. I'm sure as you've walked, through our beautiful city and these neighborhoods and whatnot, you walk in front of a house that has a sturdy fence, and chihuahuas come, right against the fence and they start barking and they seem and they bark in a very menacing way, but you know that they are not really going to do anything. So that's Bethel. Bethel is an ally of Ai. It's situated a couple of miles distance from Ai, towards the west. Dottie and Kira is Ai. So this is Ai and this is Bethel. Okay? Again, neighbors, allies. The reason why we only have one person for Bethel and two people for Ai, it's because one of these individuals, Dottie specifically, is the actual city, and the other person, Kira specifically, she is the army of Ai. Now, behind Ai, we actually have Israel, the fighting men of Israel. And how many men did we mention here? 30,000. Now, the reason why we have two individuals there behind the city of Ai, it's because these 30,000 military individuals, they're actually going to be split up into different positions doing different things. So this is geographically what is happening here. Everybody understand it so far? More or less? Okay. So now I'm going to tell you what occurred, and then we are going to read it. And hopefully it'll make more sense as we read it hereafter. So I mentioned north of Ai, strategically, Joshua sent his fighting men. Now in Numbers, when they did a census, prior to them going into the promised land, just to count the number of people, it is stated there towards the end of Numbers that there were 600,000 men who were of age to battle. But it doesn't mean that they were the real fighting men. It's sort of like, when you have a war, there are certain types of people, specifically men, but women as well, from a range of age that can fight, but they are not your best fighters. They are not the most proficient at fighting. And here, those who were, quote unquote, the real fighting men were the ones selected, the best ones. So that's 30,000. But as I mentioned, they're not just going to stay there. Joshua sends them north of Ai, and then he splits them into two groups. The first group is going to be only 5,000 men. And I'm going to ask you to come to position number 2. Now, these 5,000 men now are situated between Bethel, the Chihuahua, and Ai, who still has all its citizens and all its military men in the city. Now, why do you think Joshua did this? It was very strategic, because now part of the military of the Hebrews, of the Jews, they are isolating Ai from an ally. Now they are in between them. And this is still going on in a very stealthy manner. They're just camping there, but they have not been seen yet. They were sent by night. Eventually they're just kind of, going around and strategically being placed in these positions. But again, they have not been seen yet. Now it gets to a point where they have to be seen. They should be seen. So we had 30,000 initially, minus 5,000, what remains? 25,000. These 25,000 individuals now, they come down in a more visible place where you can actually turn this way for now. You will turn the other way eventually. So Mateo here now, is in a position that he can be seen by Ai and its king. And Mateo is going like, hey, look at me. I am right here waiting for battle. Remember me? Remember us? I know you kicked our butts before, but here we are again going to fight once more. Now the king, what does he say? Come on, really? You are back for more? Haven't you had enough? Okay, same thing is going to happen. So he sends his whole military towards these 25,000. And once Mateo, the 25,000, sees that this is happening, he turns around and acts like he is running away. And then you act like you're running after him. Full speed. Come on. Like Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt. Come on. Come on. You can do it. Now, what is happening? The city doesn't have any protection. Why? All of the military is chasing after these 25,000 men. But guess what? 5,000 left. Now, the Chihuahua, we don't know what it did and what it does. There's just a mention of it. So it was taking over. You can kneel down. Insignificant. Once Kira, the military, runs out of the city is left unprotected. And then what? These individuals come into the city and destroy it. Kneel down. Go into the city, towards it, close to it, stay there. Now, there comes a point in the battle where you notice something. You look back and you see smoke. And you see from far away chaos. And you're like, what is going on? And right at that particular time, you turn around. Mateo, not you. You're still turned. Mateo turns around and you actually engage in battle. You make a U-turn and you start, and as you are doing this, you're like, oh no! It was just a ploy. They were just playing with me. And as you do that, you go and you attack from the flank. And now they're being flanked and attacked from both sides. And victory is imminent. Utterly destroyed, and the battle is won. Get what is happening here? I need a drink. So let's read as we reflect upon what just occurred here. Verse 9. Joshua, therefore, sent them out, and they went to lie in ambush and stay between Bethel and Ai, on the west side of Ai. But Joshua lodged that night among the people. Then Joshua rose up early in the morning and mustered the people and went up, and he and the elders of Israel before the people of Ai. And all the people of war who were with him went up and drew near, and they came before the city and camped on the north side of Ai. Now a valley lay between them and Ai. So he took about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai, on the west side of the city. And when they had set the people, all the army that was on the north of the city and its rear guard on the west of the city, Joshua went that night into the midst of the valley. Now it happened, when the king of Ai saw it, that the men of the city hurried and rose early and went out against Israel to battle, he and all his people at a appointed place before the plain. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel made as if they were beaten before them, and fled by the way of the wilderness. So all the people who were in Ai were called together to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were drawn away from the city. There was not a man left in Ai or Bethel who did not go out after Israel, so they left the city open and pursued Israel. So again, this great strategy is unfolding. a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, portions of army being placed strategic in one place and in another. And the king of Ai is being fooled. Why is he being fooled? Because he is essentially doing the same thing that he did before. If it worked before, why not try it again? Remember our great president, George W. Bush, the son? There was this speech that he was giving. And during the speech, he uttered these words. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't fool me again. What he meant to say was, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's the quote. Essentially, the Israelites changed their tactic, changed their battle plan. Now, Ai, the city, its king, its army, did exactly the same thing. Because again, that's what worked. They were comfortable with that, and they were lulled into a sense of security. So as this is all going on, seemingly now Joshua is being placed in a very strategic position because he is sort of guiding the chess pieces of this battle. So as we move on, God is instructing him to make certain signs and signals so that the final part of this battle now is being played out. So on verse 18, then it says, Then the Lord said to Joshua, Stretch out the spear that is in your hand towards Ai, for I will give it into your hand. And Joshua stretched out the spear that was in his hand towards the city. So those in ambush arose quickly out of their place. They ran as soon as he had stretched out his hand, and they entered the city and took it and hurried and set the city on fire. And when the men of Ai looked behind them, they saw, and behold, the smoke of the city ascended to heaven. So they had no power to flee this way or that way. And the people who had fled to the wilderness turned back on their pursuers. Verse 21. Now when Joshua and all of Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city, and that the smoke of the city ascended, they turned back and struck down the men of Ai. Then the others came out of the city against them. So they were caught in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on the other side. And they struck them down so that they let none of them remain or escape. So here, finally, we have this great victory. But now what I want to focus on are sort of the similarities and differences between the first battle of Ai and the second battle of Ai, and the victory now that we've seen, and compared to the victory that we saw previously with Jericho. Fact of the matter is, as we've illustrated and explained, the battle plan was distinctly different. Wouldn't you agree? The differences between the number of fighting men, 3,000 versus 30,000. The difference between, again, the plan of battle. Initially, seemingly in a proud fashion, they just rushed in and then rushed out. Now, they're being very sneaky, right? Sort of like a trick play in football. They're being positioned in strategic places and waiting and hiding and doing things to sort of coerce their enemies to do things that they should not do, namely leave their city so that it is void of anyone who can protect it, and now it can be attacked. But if we reflect upon what is happening here and what has happened before, the initial battle, the one that they lost, they did not lose it because they lacked the military prowess. Again, the Bible, Scripture, the story has described essentially why they lost. Why did they lose? They lost because God lifted his favor from his people, because they disobeyed. So essentially that was the reason why. However, there's something to be said about how different these battles actually took place, what actually occurred. So that also is part of the equation, even though it is not the most important part of the equation. Now, let's compare. Compare this victory to the previous victory in Jericho. In Jericho, we see something that no one would have imagined, something miraculous. This great fortified city being destroyed essentially by having people roam around it and then scream and yell and play their instruments, and the walls fall down and then the city is destroyed. Completely miraculous. Nothing having to do with military strategy, game planning, being smarter than your opponent. It had all to do with relying upon God, what he told you to do, and following through and experiencing the victory, almost not really doing anything, just following instructions. And here we have something distinctly different. God sort of lays a general game plan. He tells them, take this number of people and sort of do this. And then we see in the description in the narrative that Joshua actually put in a little bit more of the details. And he was strategizing. So there was room and there's agency for Joshua to actually elaborate a portion of the game plan, even though God was the one who was kind of orchestrating it all. But it was very much practical. It was something that we can see in history, in movies, something that makes sense. Something that you wouldn't really think of as miraculous. You would think of it a good strategy. However, even though the battles now pertaining to these different victories, they played out in a very different manner, the means to victory stayed the same. Wouldn't you agree? God, the ultimate source, the means to victory. How is this applicable? Why does this matter? Ultimately, God is the means to our victory. He is the source pertaining to the answer of all problems. The Bible is very clear that he is ultimately the one. The Bible is also clear that those who claim that there is no God, that he is not involved, that it does not matter, that is utter foolishness. He is the means, he is the source of our victory, much like he was the means and the source of their victory. With God, victory. Without God, defeat. Yes. Pretty simple. Regardless of circumstances, regardless of what the problem was, who the enemy was, what strategy you had, with God, victory. Without God, defeat. The means to success, the means to victory. However, again, different techniques, different plans, different resources, different ways. And this is the part of foolishness that we often take part in and don't even realize it. Hopefully all of us here understand that God is the ultimate means to our victory and our success, the answer to our problems and to our questions, one way or another. But very often, we piggyback off of this ideal, this truth, this reality, and then we put God in a little box and we say, okay, because you are the means and because you are the source, then you must act in a certain way, and this is the only way that you can act. This is the only way that victory can be achieved. This is the only way that this will make sense. God must act in a particular way, or else he is not God. Equally as foolish. We see in the Bible God acting in ways that we cannot understand, that we would not have imagined beforehand, that we even disagree with, if you are to be frank and honest. Now, we disagree because we don't have all the elements, we don't have all the resources to understand exactly why God is doing such a thing. Sometimes it is told, sometimes it is not. And who are we to disagree anyways? But again, from a very human perspective, we're kind of like, really, God? That's the way? God works. God works in very elaborate, mysterious, magical ways, miraculous ways that really we don't even have to be very much involved in. It's almost like he's doing all the work. In other times, he brings us close to his plan. And it almost seems like a very human process, to the point where some people would say, that's not God. I could have thought of that. That was just a good plan. You worked hard, you did your job, and now you have the fruits of your labor. Question. What means? Has it changed? No. He is just using a different game plan. Just because God now is choosing to do something, apparently a little bit more human and strategic, it doesn't mean that he is any less involved. That is just his sovereign choice to do something that actually makes sense to us every once in a while. That again, that brings us closer to his plans, and then it's almost like we're taking part in it. We are part of the decision making. We are part of the actual doing of said plan. We are the moving pieces. We are being orchestrated, and we are doing things in an organized fashion, and again, working hard, and afterwards, reaping the fruits of our labor. Victory is upon us. Why? Because of us? Ultimately? No. Why? He is the means and the source of our life, one way or another. Do not be foolish. Now be foolish in thinking that he is not the means, the source. Now be foolish in thinking that he is only for one way. In the way that makes sense to you, in the way that you've seen in the Bible, in the way that you perceive him working through other people or in other people. He does it however it happens.